Yeah, let's talk about your time in New York. First of all, the Stella Adler Institute, world renowned as an acting school. So I'm sure that was incredible. And then you add
Very
New York
much.
into that, and then you add a global pandemic into that. So you were released into the wild as an actor right when everything was shut down. So let's hear
Yeah.
about that experience.
Yeah. Well, the training itself kind of, yeah, speak for itself. It was exactly everything I needed. And I was very lucky, I think, to attend the studio when there were still a couple of OG teachers there who've since passed on, but in particular, a guy named Ron Burris, who he was just he was sort of the natural successor of the Adler method. He was like sort of her personal assistant and ended up sort of teaching classes with her and then sort of for her. And so, but yeah, he was just like the wisest dude I've ever met. One of those guys who just understands the human condition so well and so thoroughly that nothing ever fazed him. He's just like a yogi of acting wisdom, if that makes sense. And but yeah, so I was very glad to learn from him in particular, but really everybody at the studio. Um, it was great to yeah, just solid. After having done the slightly more academic route of going to university for theater, it was nice to just have 8 hours a day, 8 9 hours a day in the studio, just doing you know voice, warm up. We had a warm up class, we had a yoga class, we had a dance class, um, all kinds of other like physical theater classes and stuff. Shakespearean verse, a bunch of scene study classes, script analysis, just all the real red meat of actor training. Um, yeah, and so yeah, graduating in 2020 was interesting. We were actually, I think, 2 weeks away from doing our final productions in March 2020. They were slated for the end of the month. I was in a play called The Clean House. Um, and then, actually, funny enough, I had just flown back home to Toronto to film something for Sloppy Jones, actually, for the weekend. Uh, at the time when, talk was kind of, uh, people were getting a little bit more worried about this thing from Wuhan,
Hmm.
China. And so my girlfriend Jamie tried to convince me not to bother going back to school, back to New York, but I did anyways, and that lasted 2 days before the school was shut down. And so in like 3 days, in the span of 3 days, I took like 4 flights or whatever math is. Ended up back home in Toronto, and it was at that point it was kind of like, okay, we'll see you in a couple weeks. We'll all come back and we'll get this all done. Bing bang boom. And then like 4 or 5 months later, we finally decided, okay, this isn't going to get any easier anytime soon. We'll just so we adapted all these plays for Zoom, which was an interesting and challenging medium to play to, because it wasn't quite TV, or like it wasn't quite like doing a movie or whatever. It is theater. Like everything is done sequentially, and only people watching it live can watch it. Like we weren't allowed to record it and anything. So that was quite a challenge, but I think we rose to it fairly well. One of our audience members actually thought that the play was written for that medium, so that was a good compliment to get, even though the play was written in the '90s. Um, so that was cool. But suffice it to say, I don't want to watch another Zoom play ever again in my life. There were so many of my cohort, graduating, and at the time, and I was lucky that being from Toronto, a big kind of uh, industry, metropolis. Uh, I wasn't ever gonna. I wasn't gonna bother trying to stay in New York City and making a go of my career there. Just because I didn't want to deal with bother with all the visa stuff. And so, but I was the only Canadian in my class, and everybody else, all the other international cohort, they all did want to stay in New York. And so after a training program, you can get a particular visa that lets you stay in the country for a year. But during that year, you have to amass like the longest and most legit resume possible so that you could show it to some random immigration officer who knows nothing about the industry. And they'll be like, yeah, okay, this guy's legit. He can stay. You know, he's not trying to steal American jobs or whatever. And so, yeah, I really don't envy a lot of my my international classmates who graduated during the worst possible year to try and get that done. So
Right.
yeah, like I said,
All their credits were Zoom plays.
exactly.
Here's my resume of Zoom performances.
Yeah.
Have more of a record of it, I guess.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What was your favorite part about New York, aside from the global pandemic?
Well, New York in and of itself is just an experience. You know, living there is very different from visiting. You know, it's a whole tourist city, but you really experience, I mean, like anywhere really, the difference between visiting somewhere and the difference between actually living there. And the difference is quite stark in New York City. You know, getting to know the place like a local was very cool. But and also,
it's always great when you're in New York and somebody asks you for directions, and you're like, oh, and then you actually know. You're like, oh yeah, the subway station's right there. Make a right, and you're like, oh, look at me, I'm a New Yorker now.
Exactly. Yeah, coming from Toronto where there are 2 subway lines, and going to New York where there are like 80 or something crazy. Right. It's a bit of a learning curve, but yes, I was eventually able to give directions to people. But also the one advantage I had being at the Adler studio was because of the name recognition of the place, and that, you know, they have a bunch of long-standing relationships with a lot of Broadway and off-Broadway and off-Broadway theaters. We were fairly often given comps to some shows, so I got to see a lot of free theater in New York City. You know, the mecca of theater in the English-speaking, well, in North America, anyways. And so I got to see some really good theater that way for absolutely free, and I got to see also some really, really horrendous theater, which was equally educationally valuable, I think.
Any favorites on the good side? Memorable performances?
Oh goodness, there was one play I didn't. I think I paid for this one, but I saw Bryan Cranston in Network.
Nice.
That was really good. That was a real standout performance. That was like on the edge of your seat, moments with tears welling up in my eyes, just watching the magic of theater happen in front of me. You know, that was crazy. There was a production of Long Day's Journey into Night. At which theater I don't remember, but Jeremy Irons was in that one. So, and I don't remember who. And Jeremy Irons and Leslie Manville, I believe. That one was really good. I'd read that play before, but you know, seeing it brought to life by such outsized performers as them. Was really impressive.
Amazing. Yeah, I love TV and film actors who, if they, for whatever reason, didn't want to, they could never have to, like, they don't have to do theater. They make way more money doing TV and film. But I love people who come back and like over and over do Broadway, and they do theater shows, and they don't let go of that. Instead of, they could just live the celebrity life and get paid $2 million to do a stupid commercial if they need some money. But the people who come back and are like, that's how you know who the real gamers are, who the real actors are.